It is a developed trait that usually happens between the ages of 3 and 5, where you learn to share and or take turns. Now, normally when babies are playing by themselves, that is called serial play. Now, when they learn to play with others, they are developing a sense of empathy, care, being kind. And unfortunately, that tactic is oftentimes used by the crazy maker. They don't have any empathy. So for many of us, it's like, well, what the fuck do we do because it's not like, I mean, some of you can stay away from your families. Most of you need to stay away from them fuck niggas. None of you can stay away from that egocentric boss at work. So here's what you do with a crazy maker. Here's my advice, right? Now listen, I ain't no therapist, but this is just what I know, right? You got to take a bird's eye view when it comes to a crazy maker. You cannot be impulsive in your response. You have to understand that letting go and creating space in your response when it comes to a crazy maker creates an observer's view. There's no bigger deflator than that. If your responses are thought out and not in response to impulsivity, the chances are very little that a crazy maker can get you wrapped up in their web. The other thing you have to do is maintain a high and healthy level of a sense of self-worth. Now, if you listen to previous shows of mine, you will understand that self-worth comes from self-esteem, which is given to you, right? But there are times where in our formidable years, we aren't given the tools to have the worth that's necessary for the esteem. So therefore, we involve ourselves with crazy makers or in chaotic relationships or in chaos, period, in order to find validation for what it is that we lack. We treat people how to treat us. And I know that that is really such a cliche in this world. But when it comes to a crazy maker, you know what's funny is a crazy maker will treat, so for instance, my ex was a crazy maker. And there were times where I knew that he had the ability to treat me better. I knew he did. And I think that I reinforced crazy making behavior in him by accepting his narcissism, his double binding, his gaslighting. I taught him how to treat me. And what was maddening to me was that I knew that he could treat other women better. I knew he could. I just didn't know why. What was his issue with me? And I realized that his issue was me with myself. And how much I had, accepted a lot of the toxic behavior because of my own lack of self-worth. So again, maintain a healthy sense of self-worth. Here's another thing going into the holidays. I know this is going to be very difficult, especially when we're talking about family, but my advice would be keep a healthy distance. Okay? Keep a healthy distance from crazy makers. Keep your visits short. Keep the talk very positive. Have a nice day. Last but not least, you've got to cultivate internal validation. Now, for many of us, we are not oftentimes tapping from an abundant source within. So when people tell you, when people talk about validation comes from a source within. And oftentimes, as I just said, our source is tapped. So that goes back to maintaining a healthy sense of self-worth, right? Because oftentimes your validation is going to come from there, from that source within. The way you cultivate internal validation is by constantly being mindful, honoring the peace and the serenity that is within, and knowing that you create that within energy and you also create that external energy. Never relinquishing the power, right? So listen, like I said, as we go into the holiday, crazy making is an actual thing, right? And for many of us who suffer with anxiety or depression or any other forms of mental illness, whether it is conscious or unconscious, I think it's important that we are aware, give these things names, and that we operate from a place of intelligence and not ignorance. Thank you guys so much for listening. I will be back next week. Yes, I will. I love you. Have a fantastic week. Peace.